living in London and mixing with the people that I do, the metropolitan elite and, the media, I have often felt more stigmatized and judged by those people more for choosing not to have children than for being a lesbian. And that is quite extraordinary. And I think that's something that women really should sit down and have a think about.
If we get back to the question of lesbians in this fight for feminism. So in your book you said we realized, I guess you meant feminists, we realized then as now that the twin pillars of patriarchy and heterosexuality were inseparable, and you couldn't dismantle the former without challenging the latter. So this explains indeed the hatred towards and the attacks towards lesbians. But does it also explain the fact that there are so many prominent feminists who are also lesbians? Is it because they didn't buy into this heterosexuality narrative, and it was maybe easier for them to liberate themselves and see like the big picture and to understand this patriarchy system?
That's a really interesting question, and it's one that I can't fully answer with any broad authority, except for, I suppose, to talk about my own experience. So I think it's extremely difficult for feminists to look across the breakfast table at a man they think may well be the type of man that they are campaigning against. So although there are plenty of anti-sexist men or just non-sexist men, decent men, there are plenty of those men. Many, many women end up with the not so decent men. And let's face it, the bar is very low when we talk about decent men. And there is the joke, isn't there? Did you hear the one about the anti-sexist man that walked into a bar because it was set so low? And it's not good enough to just not beat your wife. It's not good enough to just not pay for sex. It's not good enough to just tell your daughters as well as your sons that they have potential to do whatever they wish. Decency requires resisting the status quo, if that status quo is harmful to one half of the planet, including for me as a white person. It's not enough that I'm just not racist. What else am I doing to tackle those inequalities and that oppression? So that it's a big question for heterosexual women, I think, to I suppose to ask themselves, how do I campaign with other women to end patriarchal norms and sexual violence when my husband often has sex with me when he knows I'm not keen to have sex? How do I reconcile?
That's rape within marriage, right?
Indeed, which was only criminalised thanks to feminists in 1992 in England and Wales. So how do these heterosexual feminists have to ask themselves, how do I reconcile my feminist campaigning with the fact that I live with a man who I saw watching pornography? All of these questions. For lesbians, of course, many lesbians are not feminists. Many feminists are not lesbians. But if you look at women of my generation and older, so I'm 59 and I met feminists when I was 17, and the majority of them at that stage were about 15 years older than me. They had been through university at least once. Many of them, were well established within their particular careers or jobs. They'd been on the left, all of the things that I hadn't done. But I met these women and they mentored me, and they were, you know, great role models. And I came to recognize through talking with those women and organizing with them that being a lesbian was something that feminism had given me permission to be. Because one of the demands of the early women's liberation movement was a women's right to sexual autonomy. And that can mean choosing to love women, choosing to reject men sexually, choosing to be with women sexually. And it, of course, means for heterosexual women choosing when to have sex and with whom, as opposed to doing it to please a man or capitulating to sexual exploitation. And so I think also for lesbians of my generation, and as I say, older, choosing not to have children was a big thing also. Although many lesbians now, because the laws and social norms have changed towards lesbians having children, both as individuals and within couples, it was a given that if women had a free and open choice and they weren't going to get pregnant accidentally, that we probably would choose not to have children. Not, of course, because we had anything against women who do, and certainly not because we had anything against babies or kids that were in our social circle, but because we thought we might actually want to leave a different kind of legacy behind, that we might want to put that time, energy, and money into being free to do our campaigning as feminists. Now, the world has changed since then, but those values are still, I think, core values when it comes to women making decisions about our own freedom and liberation. And the right to be able to actively and happily choose not to have children is one of them. And I have to say that, you know, although I grew up in a very working class environment in the northeast of England, which was very, very impoverished, I'm now a middle class privileged professional living in London. And there's no two ways about that. But your background never leaves you, as you know, as we know. But living in London and mixing with the people that I do, the metropolitan elite and, you know, the media, I have often felt more stigmatized and judged by those people more for choosing not to have children than for being a lesbian. And that is quite extraordinary. And I think that's something that women really should sit down and have a think about. Because, of course, once you have children, you can't regret them. It's a terrible thing to regret having children because it impacts on the child, it impacts on you. They are a permanent state in your life. But if you go back and ask women, older women whose children are grown and who can have this conversation without upsetting their kids, like I can with my mom, many women would have made very different choices if they'd had a real choice, if they'd had an open and free choice. And that's the same with lesbianism. How many more women would be lesbians if there was no anti-lesbian discrimination, if heterosexuality was not compulsory for women? How many more would actually go down that path?
Yeah, I was reading recently, almost concurrently with your book. I was reading Colette Guillaumin's book, Sex, Race, Power and Ideology. And yeah, she was explaining how marriage and how having kids are all part of patriarchy. And maybe, yeah, actually it goes beyond patriarchy, because maybe patriarchy itself is a way for like the broader like capitalist system to be more beneficial for the 1%, as they call them. Because when you think about it, having children is good for the economy, at least for the people at the top, because it creates more competition for work, right? So yeah, so do you think there's a link there between like patriarchy and the more global capitalist ideology and yeah, these elites, these 1% or one in 1,000 who are always implementing or pushing for some policies which at the end of the day benefit them?
obviously that's a very straightforward and clear Marxist argument, and one that I would concur with. I'm not a socialist feminist, meaning yes, I'm a socialist and yes, I'm a feminist, but there's no hyphen between the two. So I don't consider, I don't think, for example, that an end to capitalism would destroy patriarchy. I think patriarchy is its own system that is propped up by misogyny. And what I mean by that is, men on the left have often said, after the revolution, then we'll focus on women's liberation, or after the revolution, there will be no sexism and patriarchy will die. Well, that hasn't happened where you've seen massive changes within societies post-revolution. So, when the Berlin Wall came down, for example, there were many women running from East Germany to the West, talking about abuse, sexual abuse in the home, domestic violence. And of course, post the wall coming down, the country was flooded with pornography and capitalism really took a hold, which then exacerbated women's oppression. So it's very complex, but if ending capitalism, or even the kind of uber capitalism that we're seeing today, if that brought about liberation for women, then what do we do about male violence? What do we do about men on the left and their sexism and their misogyny? Are they suddenly going to respect women as equals, stop using porn, stop paying for sex? They'll never settle an argument with their fists. Why would that happen? So, yes, of course, dismantling capitalism and critiquing and challenging the excesses of capitalism is beneficial to women because we are the world's poor and we're the most exploited under that system. But it's not the answer, and nor is it the answer to racism, to the oppression of people of colour within the global north.
So just to talk about this fallacy of equality, in your book, actually, you've interviewed how many people was it? 50 or more?
So I mainly interviewed young women under the age of 30, from the age of 18, although I did also talk to others, but they made up the bulk of, I suppose that they're who the book's for, although I want everyone to read it, including men, but I want it to speak to young women. So they were the ones that I most talked to over a period of about a year, in groups and individually. Although their words aren't necessarily directly in the book, their voices are threaded throughout the narrative.
Yeah, well, one quote that I found really brilliant was of this person who was called Sandra, that you interviewed in 2020 last year, and she's on equality. She said, "I am sick of men telling me that feminism is about equality. If I wanted to beat up my boyfriend, get turned on by his humiliation, and spend every Friday night in a lap dance club, maybe that would be something to aim for." So yeah, it's exactly this. So it's an excellent point, and yeah, women shouldn't look for equality with the group. And I belong to this group. I know full well, which is with the group which is dysfunctional at best, and ridden with pathological behavior. So yeah, I found that really brilliant, and yeah, there's so many excellent quotes from these people you have interviewed in the book. Like I said, it's extremely packed, and very interesting in this regard, and everybody should read it, because as a man over 30, obviously, I found it extremely interesting. So I think everyone will find it interesting. What would you like to tell us as a last word, Julie, about your book, its goal, and like the larger goal of feminism?
Well, the larger goal of feminism has to be to draw more women into the movement and to give women, particularly young women, newer feminists, the courage and the confidence to speak out against what's become a very popular narrative of neoliberalism. Sex work is work, stripping is empowering, the full face veil is a choice and a fuck you to the West. I mean, all of those shibboleths, all of those kind of arguments that have become so prevalent within mainstream privileged feminism. And what I want is to not go back to the past. We should never go back to the past. Things always have to move on, progress. We change with society, and so we should. And we now operate as feminists within a world of social media and technology that really drives certain issues. But we should retain core values within feminism, just as every social movement on the planet does. We know the bedrock, for example, of the Black Civil Rights Movement. We know the demands of anti-racist campaigners. We understand the issues that workers have in battling against the powers that be. We understand that disability rights have core values. For example, this is not a cap in hand approach, which is why disabled people used to be called handicapped, that you stand there asking for charity. This is not about tolerating people. The disability rights movement says that this is a social model that we need to pursue, that we see the outside world as creating disadvantage and disability as opposed to disabled people bringing it on themselves. And so for feminists, we have to adhere to those core values. And I hope that the core values of feminism run through the book. This is not about seeking equality with men to become every bit as bad or as, as you say, dysfunctional as men. It's about liberating women from our oppression. It's about taking that power from men and not exploiting it ourselves. It's about striving for a world in which no woman is prostituted and no man thinks that he has the right to buy the inside of a woman's body or purchase access to that. It's about looking at what unites women as opposed to constantly being told what divides us, while still recognizing the huge divisions and differences between women. And what I really want is for young women who are being relentlessly bullied by men in university, feminist societies, in LGBTQ plus societies. I want them to be able to speak out and not be constantly cowed and terrified of speaking out. Because, of course, we're living in a situation at the moment where the punishment is so severe when these young women speak out against prostitution. I mean, they're called whorephobic by so-called progressives. As I said before, they're called Islamophobic, even if they're women who are brown and from Muslim communities. When they speak out against religious fundamentalists, they are referred to as transphobic if they say that you shouldn't have convicted sex offenders who are identifying as transgender women in women's prisons. This is bullying, and it's relentless bullying, and I want to give some ammunition, or at least a tool, to these younger women to be able to say enough is enough.